Okay, so continuing on with my story about the WWE Hall of Fame Induction Ceremony this year. I forgot one thing that I wanted to mention. So right before the Booker T portion started with Stevie Ray coming out to introduce him, it was maybe 8:45, 8:50, okay? So John and I have been sitting in those stools that I mentioned the whole time, getting this great view of the Hall of Fame. Two guys show up. Oh, those are our seats. We're like, what? Like, are you serious? You're an hour late. You missed Mick Foley, you missed Trish Stratus, and you missed the beginning of Booker T, and you're just showing up? So, I get the feeling some people are just fucking assholes, and they don't even know what they're doing when they buy these tickets. I'm gonna buy these expensive bar seat tickets, and then not fucking show up for an hour after it starts. Pretty stupid. But, yeah, so we had to move, and what we ended up doing, we moved over to a different area where these photos are actually being taken from, where it's a standing only, so it's like you get a drink and you stand and drink it at this countertop, and we did that, so we ended up standing for most of the night, standing and leaning on this thing, but it kind of sucked again, because I really wish we could have sat in our seats, but they were so non-accommodating for someone with a condition like mine. And even standing, it was better, but it wasn't great. Like, my legs started to go numb, and it hurt me, and then I had to move, and it was a pain in the ass. But anyway, I digress. That's not really what we're here to talk about. Okay, so up next, after this happened, up next we had Bob Backlund. Okay? And he, first of all, what the hell? He was introduced by, of all people, Maria Menounos, okay? Who apparently he does actually know and has history with. And she grew up knowing him, and he was like a hero to her, and he actually had personal interaction with her as she was growing up as a kid. Here's the problem, though. Nobody likes Maria Menounos in the WWE, okay? I don't know why the WWE feels the need to try to bring in semi-celebrities and shit to try to get them involved in shit. Like, Maria Menounos was at Wrestlemania last year, and she did a wrestling match. Guess what? Nobody likes her. You know what I mean? Like, she has nothing to do with pro wrestling. No one wants to see her there. So, she's here trying to introduce Bob Backlund, right? She decides to write like a 15 to 20 minute fucking intro for him. To which, after 5 minutes, the crowd began booing so loudly. Like, insanely booing, to the point where she almost lost it. Like, she almost broke down, and she finally I think she just, like, dropped half the speech and said, okay, here's Bob. And finally he came out. So, it was messed up, but at the same time, at least the show got moving, okay? So Bob comes out. Now, Bob Backlund, for those of you who don't know, Bob Backlund, like, way back in the day, so we're talking like the 1970s, was huge. He carried the WWE as, like, this role model, the perfect American. He actually used to be, like, have, like, things where he'd go with kids and help out kids and stuff and help them to live wholesome lives. But then he went basically out of the wrestling world for quite some time, but the WWE brought him back in the 1990s for about a year to do a kind of like a campaign with Bret Hart, with Diesel, where he was like a crazy heel. He would come back and he would start putting everyone in his finisher, the crossface chicken wing. He would just do it insanely and like knock people out, choke them out till they're unconscious, and he was just out of his mind. And that was his character in the 1990s. But so no one knew what this was going to be like. Well, let me tell you something. Bob Backlund is fucking insane, okay? This guy is nuts. He starts his speech talking about how he was a boy who grew up on a farm, and he used to have to do all this, like, milk cows and do this shit, and everyone's like, what the fuck is he talking about? And then he's talking about how he's like, you should never give up. You cannot give up. If you give up, you'll never win. You'll never aspire to anything. Even if you lose, you gotta still try. He's like going nuts. His face is getting red, and I'll show you the next photo here. Look at this. He takes his shirt off, and he's like flipping out. Look how red his face is. He's like going nuts. His hair's getting messed up. He's like going crazy. So he's like, he went on for like over 20 minutes just going insane. Like, oh, that's it. You gotta do this. You gotta do that. And then he would go off on insane tangents that no one could understand. And he did this for 20 minutes. So then finally, after 20 minutes of this happening, okay, Vince McMahon tiptoes out onto the stage behind him, and he actually goes like shh with his hand to say like, don't tell Bob that I'm here. And all of a sudden he like kind of curves around Bob. He's like, hey, Bob, you know, he says something to him. You have to assume he said, you got to kind of hurry it up, wrap it up, because we got to get going. And so Bob's like, what? Well, you know, well, I guess we got to cut it. You got to cut it short, but remember, never give up, blah, blah, blah. And he goes off on his tangent again. He's like losing his mind. So then Triple H runs up on the stage, and he's like trying to corral Bob Backlund. They're trying to like get him to like calm down and stop talking so they could get him off the stage, right? So finally Bob looks like he's calmed down. He's like, all right, thank you, everyone. Good night. And they start playing his outro music, you know, so he'll leave the stage. And then all of a sudden he runs over and grabs the mic and he's like, but then let me tell you this and that. But the mic was off, so he was basically like just talking to himself, but he didn't even realize it. So he just kept talking with no mic. And so finally both Triple H and Vince like walked him off the stage. It was so insane. It was like an old man completely like separated from his mind, and he just didn't know what he was talking about. It was absolutely nuts. And I'm sure they're not going to show that on TV either. Okay. So up next after Bob Backlund, and this was a good one, okay, was Donald Trump, and we had Vince come out to introduce him. The problem with Donald Trump is that he's the celebrity inductee this year, okay? Now, I can understand the gimmick of a celebrity inductee, especially if it was a year that maybe was a little bit light, like they didn't have a lot of people for the Hall of Fame. And they've done people in the past like Pete Rose, who he was on a couple of Royal Rumbles and got chokeslammed by Kane. And they had, I think they did Drew Carey one year, and I think they actually did Mike Tyson for his involvement with the DX angle. So I can understand why they have this thing. It's a filler spot for the Hall of Fame for slower years. But this year they had a loaded Hall of Fame full of worthy people, like really well-known, renowned, respected wrestlers who really deserve to be there. And then to say that Trump deserved to be there along with them was kind of an insult. And I think that's why so many people had a negative reaction to Trump being in this year's Hall of Fame, okay? Now, Trump only was involved with basically two times the WWE. First of all, back in the 1980s, there were back-to-back WrestleManias at his Trump Arena, or whatever the hell it was called back then. So, and that was in one regard, one way that he was involved. But the other way is that back in 2000, I think it was 2008, at WrestleMania, they had the Battle of the Billionaires, where it was, you know, Vince versus Trump, and it was actually Bobby Lashley against Umaga in the match, and whoever lost the match, that billionaire had to shave his head. And it's kind of funny because both, you know, Umaga and Bobby Lashley aren't with the company anymore, although for completely different reasons. Umaga unfortunately passed away, while Bobby Lashley basically got released, went on to MMA, did a horrible job, and now he's in like obscurity somewhere. And so they show, you know, Vince talks about it. He talks about how WrestleMania was back-to-back thanks to Trump at his arena, and then he shows the Battle of the Billionaires. And everyone's kind of like, that's it? That's the only reason he's in the Hall of Fame is because of that? That's lame. So then Trump comes out, okay? And when Trump comes out, he gets the biggest boos of the night. I'm talking bigger than Maria Menounos, bigger than Trish Stratus's husband, Rob. Like, the arena explodes with boos for him. No one likes this guy. And they know he has no right to be in the Hall of Fame, especially standing alongside some of the greater people that were being inducted that night. And so he's just like, well, I don't know why you don't like me so much, but I just want to let everyone know that, you know, I did enjoy being involved with the WWE, and this is a great honor. In fact, I'll go on as to say that this is the biggest honor I've ever received. And, of course, that was so phony. The entire arena's like, "Bah, get the F off the stage, you old motherfucker." You know, everyone's just trying to boo the fuck out of him. And finally, he just got the picture. He said, "Thank you, good night," and left the stage. He was the quickest one of the night by far because he knew he was just going to keep hearing boos. Alright, so that was Trump. And then last but not least, of course, the main event, the one that everyone has been waiting for ever since this WWE Hall of Fame started, the guy who should have been in the first year, but he finally decided to accept the nomination this year, okay? So it's Bruno Sammartino. And he gets inducted by who else but, that's right, Arnold effing Schwarzenegger was there. So Arnold comes in, massive pop for him, of course, insanely massive pop. And he's making some jokes. Actually, it's kind of funny because he goes, "Oh, I like the reception I'm getting tonight, but where were all of you back in January when I released my new movie?" And everyone's like, "What?" And then John actually nudges me. He goes, "Yeah, he had a movie in January. Didn't you know?" I said, "No, he had a movie that came out in January." He's like, "Yeah, it was that one where he played the sheriff of some old town and Johnny Knoxville was like his deputy." I said, "What? I don't know nothing about this movie. I know nothing whatsoever about this movie." Okay, so it was pretty funny. But then Arnold, he went on to say that, excuse me, he's like, "Oh, y'all, when I was younger, yes, and when I was working out and I was, performing to be Mr. Olympia, I was in the contest, and Bruno was actually one of the judges on the panel, and I said to myself, look at this man, he's like ripping out of his clothes, and I'm like, he's bigger than me, like how can he be a judge? This is ridiculous." Okay, so anyway, he's basically said a bunch of stuff like that, and to come to find out that Arnold actually did know Bruno for a while, although Bruno was kind of before Arnold's time. And so he did respect him, he knew him, and so then he finally introduced Bruno, which everyone had been waiting for all night. And I took a picture here, actually a snapshot, of when Bruno came out, and he came out with, who was that, Alicia Fox and Layla, I think, and he actually had like a heartfelt handshake and a hug with Arnold. I thought that was kind of a touching moment. And then finally, Bruno comes out, and, it was an awesome moment, because first of all, take a look. He looks exactly, his face is the same. His face hasn't changed at all, you know what I mean? Like, nothing has changed about this guy. I mean, I'm sure his body is emaciated, because he's 70-something years old, but look at his face, he's the same dude. So, he comes out, and he started giving a speech. Now, keep in mind, and I think a lot of people were a little bit disappointed, because I don't know if they knew this, but Bruno basically speaks Italian. And he really, he learned English over the years being here in America, so English isn't his first language. So I knew he wasn't going to be saying anything like insanely complex or anything. It was very basic, thanking everyone and saying that he loved being able to sell out Madison Square Garden 187 times and that he's so grateful that people came to see him all those times. And the fact that Madison Square Garden is in New York, and back in, the 1950s and 60s when he was selling out Madison Square Garden, New York was like the focal point of magazines in the world. So every magazine would cover the fact that he was at MSG, and then of course those magazines would be sold worldwide, and he'd get his name out there, and he'd become world-renowned basically just because he had headlined MSG so many times, and he was so grateful for that. And I basically listened to his speech for about 5 minutes, and then John and I said, we should probably get out of here, because in about 10 more minutes when he finishes, basically everyone's going to be rushing the hell out of this place, and we're going to be stuck in all these people. So we actually kind of snuck out a little early, which I think was the good plan. And so we got out of there. We walked about a block, or it was a couple blocks. We actually got a little lost. We couldn't find the Port Authority, which was kind of funny. Finally found it, jumped on the 11-something o'clock bus back to our hotel. And so that wrapped up our Saturday, in the area for WrestleMania. It was a lot of fun. It was a little tiring. It was a little disappointing that there was no way to accommodate me at the Hall of Fame besides me stealing other people's seats, because the seats were not, basically handicapped or injury friendly. But it is what it is. I had a lot of fun. I got a lot of cool pictures, as you saw, and I got to see a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that probably not a lot of people would know about, except for me, because I was there live. So that was really neat. All right, so that's it for the Hall of Fame portion. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a, stop here, start a new video, and in this video I'm going to discuss the beginnings of Sunday, which was WWE Fan Access, some of the stuff that we saw there that was pretty cool. I'm going to talk a little bit about the event itself. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I was very surprised at that I didn't expect. And then I'm going to actually talk about WrestleMania as well. So stick in there, and I'll be right back.